Hello everyone, this is Ben Carson. I'm so happy to be with the National Black Chamber of Commerce and guests today. Such an important group, and I really salute you for what you're doing to try to improve the economy and make more jobs available, encourage the whole concept of entrepreneurial risk-taking and capital investment. Those are the fuels that drive the powerful economic engine that made this into the #1 economy in the world up until last year when we lost that designation to China. But with your help and many others, we can get it back. You know, jobs is just so incredibly important. I remember when I was in college and I went to Yale, I would come back home to Detroit in the summer looking for a job. And I would always get a job, even though they were saying things like, nobody's getting any summer jobs this year, things are dismal, because I didn't do what everybody else did. I would, instead of looking at the want ads and at the posters, I would just get on the bus and travel until I saw a bunch of small businesses, which is really the backbone of growth in America, small business. And I would get off the bus and I'd go knock on doors and I'd say, hello, my name's Ben Carson, I'm a student at Yale, I'm home for the summer, I'm looking for a job. And you know what? I would get a job because a lot of the smaller businesses didn't have an advertising budget, but if somebody showed up on their doorstep, of course they had a job for them. But one summer that wasn't even working that well. And I remember when I did my interview for Yale, it was a regional interview at the Young and Rubicon advertising company. So I went to the Young and Rubicon building, got on the executive elevator, went up to the executive suite, waited for the secretary to turn her back, and darted into the office. And Mr. Standard said, Ben Carson, how are you doing? Well, how are things going at Yale? And I said, things are great, but you know, I'm home for the summer. I can't find a job. And he said, did you check with our personnel department? I said, they're not hiring any students this summer. And he picked up the phone, called the personnel director, said, so a young man by the name of Ben Carson on the way down there, give him a job. So I had a job that summer too, a little non-traditional, a little out of the box, but it worked just fine. And then one summer I was working as a supervisor for the highway cleanup crews. And you know, it wasn't that great because the guys weren't that interested in picking up garbage in the hot sun. And if I was the supervisor, I didn't want to get paid if they weren't doing their job. So I got all the guys together and I said, look, you don't want to be picking up trash in the hot sun, right? They said, you got that right. I said, okay, I have an idea. I said, why don't we start at 6 in the morning? They said, 6 in the morning? You crazy? What are they teaching with that fancy school? I said, hear me out. I said, at 6 in the morning, it's cool, and you can work efficiently. And here's the deal. I'm going to pay you for 8 hours, even if it only takes you 7 hours to pick up 100 bags of garbage. Even if it takes you only 6 hours to pick up 100 bags of garbage, I'm going to pay you for 8 hours. Whatever amount of time it takes you, I will pay you for 8 hours. You have never seen people work like this. I mean, by 8 a.m., they had 200 bags of garbage, whole stretches of highway. The people who ran the program were just flabbergasted. They would say, Carson's crews are amazing, but we never see them. But, you know, it was a win-win-win situation. And the key being, you know, if we think of ways that it really looks attractive and it works, I think we can get a lot more people involved in working. You know, one of the things that has really bothered me is that in 30 states, at least 30 states, you can actually collect more from government benefits than you can from working a minimum wage job. And a lot of people choose to collect the benefits. And you can see why they might. You can sort of understand their rationale. But what they've not considered, and one of the points we have to get across to people, is that when you take that minimum wage job, you are acquiring skills. You are establishing relationships. You are finding a way to climb the ladder of success so that a year or two later, you're much better off than the person sitting at home collecting benefits. And this is something that we clearly must begin to get across to people, particularly in our inner cities. There's been a lot of change, but there's not a lot of hope. And I think that creates a lot of frustration. You know, we hear things like, oh, the unemployment rate is down to 5.3%. The economy is just booming. Everything is wonderful. Well, not really. because as you know, you can make the unemployment rate anything you want it to be based on what numbers you include and exclude. It's really the labor force participation rate, the percentage of people eligible to work who are actually working. That number is at a 37-year low. You know, that is what people are feeling when they go out and try to get a job. That's what we're going to have to change around. And particularly in our inner cities, we need to teach people the whole concept of turning the dollar over. Turn the dollar over in your own community a couple of times before you send it out. That's how you create wealth, and then reach back and pull the next guy along. Those are the kinds of things that will help to stimulate that economic engine. This country is blessed with the most powerful economic engine the world has ever known. Nothing else even comes close to it. And yet it's been hampered and fettered by a gazillion regulations and by a tax structure that does not encourage entrepreneurial risk-taking. And those are the kinds of things that are hurting us as a nation and hurting every aspect of our nation, because we need to recognize that we are in this thing together, all of us, and a rising tide lifts all boats. I remember when I was in high school, and one of my goals was to be on GE College Bowl. It was my favorite TV program. They had 2 colleges from different places with 4 contestants on each one, and they asked questions about science, math, history, geography, and I was really good, so I wanted to be on College Bowl. But they also asked questions about classical music and classical art. Now, there was no way you were going to learn anything about classical music or classical art at Southwestern High School in inner city Detroit. I mean, in my school, you said something about Van Gogh, they would have said, put gas in it, the van will go. I mean, they had no idea what you were talking about. And I just made an executive decision that I would learn all this stuff on my own. And I started getting on a bus every day, every week, every month, going down to the Detroit Institute of Arts, roaming through those galleries until I know every picture, who painted it, when they were born, when they died, what period it represented, listening to my portable radio, Bach, Telemann, Mozart. Kids in Detroit thought I was nuts. A black kid in Motown listening to Mozart? I tried to convince them that the Mo in Motown was Mozart, but nobody was buying it. And I even decided which college to attend based on that program. I had enough money to apply to one college. I said, I'm applying to the college that wins the grand championship of College Bowl. Well, that year, grand championship was between Harvard and Yale. And Yale demolished Harvard, so I didn't want to go to school with a bunch of dummies. So I applied to Yale, and fortunately, they accepted me with a full scholarship. And off I went, thinking I was going to be on College Bowl. But you know, the year I went there was the year College Bowl went off the air. Yeah, I know, it's sad. But the good thing is, years later, when I decided I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, interestingly enough, I said, I'm going to apply to the place best known for neurosurgery, and that's Johns Hopkins. Problem is, they only took 2 people out of the top 125 every year. But when I went there for my interview, the fellow who was in charge of the residency program was also in charge of cultural affairs at the hospital. And we talked a little bit about neurosurgery and medicine. Somehow the conversation turned to classical music. We talked for over an hour about different composers and their styles, conductors, orchestras, orchestral halls. The man was on cloud 9. There was no way he wasn't taking me in the program. And I love to tell young people that story, to let them know that there's no such thing as useless knowledge. Any knowledge is helpful and can open all kinds of doors for you. But the interesting thing is, and the reason I bring that story up is because a lot of people said to me, why are you learning that European art, that European history? That's not culturally relevant to you. What does that mean, culturally relevant, to a citizen of the United States of America? Go to Ellis Island and go to that museum and look at all those pictures hanging on the wall. People who came from every continent, every country, many times only with the things that they could carry in their 2 hands. And think about this. They worked, not for 8 hours a day, but 12, 16 hours a day, not 5 days a week, but 6 or 7 days a week. No such thing as a minimum wage. They worked not for themselves, but for their sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters, that they might have a better opportunity. Hundreds of years before that, other immigrants came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less. But they too had a dream that one day their great-grandsons and great-granddaughters might pursue freedom and prosperity in this country. And do you know, of all the nations in the world, this one, the United States of America, was the only one big enough and great enough to allow all of those people from all those backgrounds to realize their dreams. And our dreams and our destinies are united. And we must stop allowing the purveyors of division to drive wedges between us and recognize that we reach the highest pinnacle that any nation has ever reached because we have so many people with so much talent. And we must learn to work together to develop that talent, every bit of that talent. We only have 330 million people. China has over 1 billion. India has over 1 billion. We need to cultivate all of ours and to be able to compete effectively and indeed have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for what you're doing.